This lesson is designed to give students practice in acquiring the characteristic rhythm of English speech by accenting only the relevant syllables. Hello students, how are you? Now previous lessons we have learnt about the affirmative sentences. पूरे टेंस का सेंटेंस कैसे तैयार करना है ये आप पहले सीख चुके हैं. सपोज प्रेजेंट का पूरा फॉर्म आई राइट ए लेटर, आई एम राइटिंग लेटर, आई हैव रिटन लेटर, आई हैव बीन राइटिंग लेटर. पास्ट फॉर्म आई रोट लेटर, आई वॉज राइटिंग लेटर, आई हैड रिटन लेटर, आई हैड बीन राइटिंग लेटर. इन फ्यूचर फॉर्म आई विल राइट लेटर, आई विल बी राइटिंग लेटर, आई विल हैव रिटन लेटर and I will have been writing later. After that, how to frame negative sentences. अब आप सीखेंगे आज नेगेटिव सेंटेंस तैयार करना. So let me start with contracted form. नेगेटिव सेंटेंस बनाने के लिए आपको कॉन्ट्रैक्टेड फॉर्म में सेंटेंस को बोलना होगा. कॉन्ट्रैक्टेड फॉर्म ऑक्सिलरी वर्ब के साथ नॉट को ऐड करने से बनता है. सो द शॉर्टेड फॉर्म ऑफ नॉट इज अटैच्ड टू द प्रीसीडिंग ऑक्सिलरी वर्ब. सपोज डू नॉट विल बी डोंट एंड डज नॉट विल बी डजंट. यहाँ पर कुछ एग्जाम्पल्स हैं, उसको आप रिपीट करिएगा. इज नॉट, इजंट, आर नॉट, aren't, am not, aren't, do not, don't, does not, doesn't, did not, didn't, will not, won't, has not, hasn't, have not, haven't, had not, hadn't, cannot, can't, would not, wouldn't, should not, shouldn't, must not, mustn't, need not, needn't, ought not, oughtn't. ये कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन फॉर्म्स का यूज़ ऑफ जब भी सेंटेंस को बोलना होगा उसमें शॉर्ट फॉर्म जरूर यूज़ करें, अदरवाइज यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू फॉलो द रिदमिक पैटर्न. नाउ this slide you will learn how to frame negative sentences. Again you will have the three parts of the sentence, that is subject, verb and object. Subject में आपके पास है first person I, second person you and third person she and he. Verb write, object a letter, an application, a poem, a story. नेगेटिव फ्रेम करने के लिए आई के साथ नेगेटिव फॉर्म डोंट आएगा, यू के साथ भी डोंट, बट थर्ड पर्सन ही और शी के साथ नेगेटिव फॉर्म डजंट. नाउ रीड द सेंटेंस. आई डोंट राइट अ लेटर, यू डोंट राइट एन एप्लीकेशन, शी डजंट राइट अ पोएम, he doesn't write a story. इस तरह से सेंटेंस को आपको 4 एस्पेक्ट में बोलना है. दैट इज कॉल्ड द 4 डायमेंशनल वेज, ताकि आप अलग अलग व्यक्तियों के साथ बातचीत करने के तरीके को समझ सकें. नाउ लेट मी मूव ऑन टू नेक्स्ट स्लाइड. That will be about table form of the tense. इसमें प्रेजेंट के साथ इंडेफिनिट, कंटिन्यूअस, परफेक्ट एंड परफेक्ट कंटिन्यूअस का फॉर्म एक साथ पढ़ना है. निगेटिव कैसे फ्रेम होता है चेक करें. जैसे कि पहले बताया आपको कि प्रेजेंट इंडेफिनिट का पैटर्न डू नॉट और डज नॉट का है. ठीक इसी तरह से जहाँ ऑक्सिलरी वर्ब है एम, इज, आर, just after the auxiliary verb attach not, तो हो जाएगा am not writing. Sentence will be I am not writing a letter. प्रेजेंट परफेक्ट देखिए, have has written और have written यूज करें नॉट, निगेटिव होगा have not written. Sentence will be I have not written a letter. प्रेजेंट परफेक्ट कंटिन्यूअस में आइए, have been writing. have been writing का निगेटिव have not been writing. Sentence I have not been writing a letter. Come to past indefinite. wrote सेकंड फॉर्म है, wrote का डमी वर्ब डिड नॉट यूज करेंगे और फर्स्ट फॉर्म ऑफ द वर्ब राइट, सो डिड नॉट राइट. सेंटेंस विल बी आई डिड नॉट राइट अ लेटर. कंटिन्यूस फॉर्म देखिए, was राइटिंग निगेटिव होगा was not writing. So I was not writing a letter. Past perfect form had written negative had not written. Sentence I had not written a letter. Past perfect continuous had been writing negative had not been writing. Sentence I had not been writing a letter. Come to future. Future indefinite में will family है, जहाँ भी will है just after the will add not, that will be negative part. So will write का negative will not write. Sentence I will not write a letter. Future continuous will be writing negative will not be writing. Sentence I will not be writing a letter. Future perfect will have negative will not have. Sentence I will not have written a letter. Perfect continuous will have been writing negative will not have been writing. Sentence I will not have been writing a letter. So इस तरीके से आप नेगेटिव फ्रेम करना और टेबल को पढ़ना सीख सकते हैं. Now let's look at the sentences that is rhythmic pattern. प्रेजेंट इंडेफिनिट में निगेटिव सेंटेंस का रिदमिक पैटर्न कैसे होगा ये चेक करें. टिटम टम टिटम मीन्स टिटम टम टिटम. टम स्ट्रेस्ड फॉर्म है, दैट इज कॉल्ड एक्सेंटेड सिलेबल. कंटेंट वर्ड्स के लिए हैं जहाँ नाउन एडजेक्टिव वर्ब एडवर्ब होते हैं. और टी अनएक्सेंटेड सिलेबल हैं, फॉर्म वर्ड्स कहलाते हैं. आर्टिकल्स, प्रोनाउंस, ऑक्सिलरी वर्ब और कंजक्शन प्रीपोजिशन के लिए इस्तेमाल होता है. लेकिन यहाँ पर निगेटिव को ज़्यादा एम्फेटिक वे में बोलने के लिए निगेटिव सिलेबल को स्ट्रेस में लेते हैं, दैट इज एक्सेंटेड सिलेबल. नाउ चेक फर्स्ट सेंटेंस. आई डोंट राइट अ लेटर. रिपीट, आई डोंट राइट अ लेटर. You don't write an application. You don't write an application. She doesn't write a poem. She doesn't write a poem. He doesn't write a story. He doesn't write a story. Next form, present continuous. The rhythmic pattern will be titum tum titum. Sentence will be I aren't writing a letter. Repeat. I aren't writing a letter. You aren't writing an application. You aren't writing an application. She isn't writing a poem. She isn't writing a poem. He isn't writing a story. He isn't writing a story. Good. Next form, present perfect. The rhythmic pattern will be titum tum titum. Check sentence. I haven't written a letter. Repeat. I haven't written a letter. You haven't written an application. You haven't written an application. She hasn't written a poem. She hasn't written a poem. He hasn't written a story. He hasn't written a story. Good. Next form, present perfect continuous. Rhythmic pattern will be titum titum titum. I haven't been writing a letter. Repeat. I haven't been writing a letter. You haven't been writing an application. You haven't been writing an application. She hasn't been writing a poem. She hasn't been writing a poem. He hasn't been writing a story. He hasn't been writing a story. Good. Next form will be past indefinite. The rhythmic pattern of this sentence will be titum tum titum. Check. I didn't write a letter. Repeat. I didn't write a letter. You didn't write an application. You didn't write an application. She didn't write a poem. She didn't write a poem. He didn't write a story. He didn't write a story. Next form, past continuous. Rhythmic pattern of the sentence will be titum tum titum. Check. I wasn't writing a letter. I wasn't writing a letter. You weren't writing an application. You weren't writing an application. She wasn't writing a poem. She wasn't writing a poem. He wasn't writing a story. He wasn't writing a story. Very good. Next form, past perfect. Rhythmic pattern of sentence will be titum tum titum. Check. I hadn't written a letter. Repeat. I hadn't written a letter. You hadn't written an application. You hadn't written an application. She hadn't written a poem. She hadn't written a poem. He hadn't written a story. He hadn't written a story. Next pattern will be past perfect continuous. The rhythmic pattern of sentence will be titum titum titum. Let's check. I hadn't been writing a letter. I hadn't been writing a letter. You hadn't been writing an application. Yes. You hadn't been writing an application. She hadn't been writing a poem. She hadn't been writing a poem. He hadn't been writing a story. He hadn't been writing a story. Very good. Now come to next form. Future indefinite. Rhythmic pattern of sentence will be titum titum tum. Titum tum titum. Let's check sentence. I won't write a letter. I won't write a letter. You won't write an application. You won't write an application. She won't write a poem. She won't write a poem. He won't write a story. He won't write a story. Good. Next form, future continuous. Rhythmic pattern of sentence will be titum titum titum. Sentence. I won't be writing a letter. Repeat. I won't be writing a letter. You won't be writing an application. You won't be writing an application. She won't be writing a poem. She won't be writing a poem. He won't be writing a story. He won't be writing a story. Good. Next form, future perfect. Rhythmic pattern of sentence will be titum titum titum. Let's take sentence. I won't have written a letter. I won't have written a letter. You won't have written an application. You won't have written an application. She won't have written a poem. She won't have written a poem. He won't have written a story. He won't have written a story. Very good. Now the last part will be future perfect continuous. The rhythmic pattern of sentence will be titum tititum titum. Let's check. I won't have been writing a letter. Repeat please. I won't have been writing a letter. You won't have been writing an application. You won't have been writing an application. She won't have been writing a poem. She won't have been writing a poem. He won't have been writing a story. He won't have been writing a story. Very good, that's nice. So students, you have practiced well. Now come to assignment part. असाइनमेंट में आपको क्रिएटिव सेंटेंस फ्रेम करना है. सब्जेक्ट 4 वेज में है. आई, यू, शी, ही. वर्ब प्ले एंड ऑब्जेक्ट विल बी क्रिकेट, फुटबॉल, बैडमिंटन, टेनिस और whatever. What would you like to take? And last part will be spoken by you. That's very careful. Handle all the sentences. Hope that you will be doing much better. So that brings my presentation to an end. Thank you very much for spending your time.